Cave explorers of Reddit, what is your creepiest or most dangerous experience? During some cave exploring or spelunking, don't know the difference between them. My family and some friends were in some deep caves, and as we were heading out, we found a slit about knee-high in the rock. Getting on your stomach, there was a tight squeeze you could get into, and it lead to a small crawl space in the rock, with quartz growing on the ceiling making a beautiful crystal ceiling display. We went in one by one, and if you were claustrophobic, this place was your living nightmare. Most times you could feel the ceiling on your back and the floor on your stomach every time you took a breath. We went deep in and it was just incredible, like a small world tucked away within solid rock. I had made it as deep in as it could go, before the pathway into the left and covered with stalagmites and stalactites of sediment. Everyone was having a grand time when we started feeling some trickles of water on our backs. It turns out, it was raining outside, and with the way the crawlspace dipped down before flattening out, this whole place would fill up with rainwater pretty quickly, with the only way for it to drain out was the way we came in. It started as trickles before it went into streams and began to pool up, being the furthest away from the exit, and you can only just crawl flat on your stomach with jagged crystal pointing down from the ceiling. I started to panic a bit. Everyone crawled out as fast as they could as the water kept coming in, the streams growing larger and larger. We left one at a time as fast as we could, but it wasn't fast enough. I could feel the water coming up to my chin as I crawled behind my brother. Each inch I took forward felt so painfully slow that I could feel the walls compress around me, and the water was unrelenting, now splashing against my panicked squirms. I got out just as the water was up to my lips, and everyone got out safely. I am not eager to try that again. Something like that happened to me, except I was by myself and there was no water. I was with my brother and friend in Pepper Sauce Cave, Arizona. We were deep inside and I found a small tunnel that went off to the right of a path that you can crawl through. This tunnel was very narrow and I had to crawl slowly, and you could almost feel the top press against your back. I told my brother to wait for me for 15 minutes, and if I don't come back, come and get me. So I crawl in about 80 feet and this tunnel starts to branch off to the right. It's getting narrower and narrower, and I thought I saw an opening at the end. I get closer with my flashlight and the opening is not at all as big as I thought it was, so it's time to turn around. I tried, but no room. The walls were almost on both sides of my ribs and the ceiling was nearly on top of my back. So 50 feet later I am crawling backwards on my chest, which was very difficult because there wasn't any room to turn around. So I get myself turned around at one point and head back. The tunnel looked different now and I branched off another path that I didn't see crawling forward. But crawling back it was visible. I was totally lost and disoriented, on my stomach and very cramped. I was getting pretty nervous. So I started to scream to my brother and my friend, but I didn't hear them. I screamed louder and louder but still didn't hear them. I crawled on my stomach a little further and tried again, and I very faintly heard their voices. Only they were below me, so I yelled to my brother at the top of my lungs to come and get me. He starts crawling and yelling at me. The whole time I have no idea where he was, just following the sound of his voice. Suddenly around the bend I see a flashlight very far away and I realized I was way off. I was so happy to see him. My cousins go caving. One of their favorite stories is about the time they went down one of their favorite caves and it started raining and flooded the only way in/out, probably about a 1-meter section completely submerged. They waited an hour or two in their little underground camping spot, but the water wasn't going down, so they just said stuff it, turned around and held their breath for that section. They said it was about the scariest thing they have done, because while they thought only 1 meter was submerged, they didn't know for sure and couldn't know until they did it, by which time it would be too late to turn around if it was more. They also love telling the story of their favorite tight tunnel, which is so small they have to take their shirts off, otherwise they are too wide. I think it's actually a vertical tunnel which they can get down fully clothed because of gravity, but they kept getting stuck while trying to pull themselves back up. I have crazy cousins. Well, this was a tomb, not a cave. I was exploring, alone, in a large ancient cemetery outside of a small town in Israel. These were Canaanite tombs that were thousands of years old. Many in this region have been left unexcavated, so the area I was looked like a huge low hill full of little dimples marking where these tombs were. So, I was wandering around these shaft tombs, which were dug deep into the ground and then branched out with different spots carved out of the rock for family members to be laid. Some of the tombs were open to the air, and quite deep. I got a little too close to the edge and fell in. I fell maybe 10 feet and was stuck down there. It was a vertical drop and the sides were loose stone and rubble. It was the middle of the day in Israel in the summer. I had no water and my cell service was kaput since I was below ground. I remember just standing there, looking up out of this hole in the ground with the blazing sun above and realizing how silent it was. It was an awful feeling, stuck in an ancient grave, like I was experienced the same silence that had existed there forever and I was now a part of it or some sort of deep thought like that. Anyway, I tried to scramble out, but the sides were too eroded and kept crumbling when attempted to hoist myself out. I was really scared I might bring down a whole wall of this tomb and become the most recent burial in a few thousand years. Anyway, I was stuck for, maybe 15 minutes at the most before levering my way up by holding onto some roots and bracing myself on more stable bits of stone. The feeling of getting the heck out of there was so relieving and personal. I rarely share that story because I was such a fool. So, not a cave, but still a pretty scary stuck in a hole story. I explored many sites afterwards, but always much more prepared than I was that day. I hadn't even told anyone where I was heading when I left the house. I don't think it would be wise for me to say the specific location, but if anyone is truly interested in some more details about what I was doing, why, and where, feel free to PM. I go caving with my dad, who grew up mining uranium until his family's mine went belly up. He's pretty used to enclosed spaces and being underground, and I was raised similarly, albeit without the radon gas. I've rappelled into pits I can't see the bottom of, bouldered my way along and over one of the largest underwater rivers in North America, nearly caught in a flash flood, and slipped into a crevice whose bottom is as of today not mapped and has never been reached or documented by anyone. It was by far the scariest damn thing to ever happen to me. I had to brace myself with my feet, back against one wall and legs stretched out in front of me, arms on either side. I was in a pretty good spot to be, roughly 10 feet down, on wet, smooth rock. And my headlamp had come unplugged from its battery in my pack, meaning I only had the light from my dad looking down on me 10 feet up to see by. He had to leave to get rope, and I couldn't really go anywhere or reattach my lamp in my position, so I got to chill in that crevice for roughly an hour. But God, it felt like so much longer. I thought the fall itself was scary. But it was nothing compared to that. Complete darkness. And it was so quiet, I could hear my blood rushing in my ears, could hear my knees creaking under the pressure, every piece of gravel that came loose from the tread of my boots hitting the sides of the crevice on the way down, just fading out. I started seeing lights and little flashes, couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. And I couldn't move to check, or I'd fall God knows how far. I could hear more than I ever wanted while simultaneously experiencing the most quiet I'd ever felt, and all I could feel was the rock against my back and hands, and presumably what my feet were braced against. I started to not be able to tell up from down, started hearing footsteps and seeing movement and shapes from the corners of my eyes. It was utter hell waiting for my dad to come back with rope to help me back out. I know what I experienced was just due to lack of visual and auditory stimuli, but damn, it was the scariest thing I have ever experienced. And, we always bring a good amount of rope with us now, even if we think we won't need it in a cave. I grew up down in the desert where there was a lot of old abandoned mine shafts. We would go explore the mine shafts for fun. There would always be some level of danger. It was common to see old abandoned boxes of dynamite and leftover mining equipment. One time we went and explored this vertical mine shaft which had a ladder that worked its way down. The ladder had a platform about every 20 feet and a hatch that would continue to the next level. I was with about 6 people I believe. We had gone down to the bottom of the mine shaft. I would guess it was about 700 feet down at this point, and we got to the point where the shaft was full of water. We all decided to go swimming in the water, which was creepy in its own right, but as we were climbing up I was looking up and I could see a light moving around. I began realizing that someone else was in the mine shaft. I came to one of the hatches and had just poked my head out when I looked to my right and I see a flashlight moving very rapidly towards me, and then the hatch was slammed shut on me. Someone was standing on the hatch and I could not open it. I was able to open the hatch after about 5 minutes, and it turned out to be someone that recognized our cars and was a friend of ours that was just messing with us, but it was very terrifying in the moment. I'll get buried but will answer, for creepiness, in the Borneo jungle where our local guide wanted to show us an ancient limestone network. More bats than I've ever come across in several cave experiences. I'm not a caver, just an avid adventurer with cave experience, probably 5 meters plus bats. But that wasn't the creepy bit. Stumbling on semi-mummified skeletons was. My guide failed to tell me the caves were ancient burial sites. Turning to see a skull a few inches from my face was physiologically and psychologically inconvenient. Scariest would probably be caving in the UK. Proper crawling and squeezing shit. Wasn't pleasant the time I thought we were gonna die. Got trapped in a small room flooded to our ankles where the tunnels in and out were fully submerged. You kinda ascended into this pocket/room/chamber. Assuming we'd either suffocate or drown wasn't great. Fortunately the water level dropped just enough after a couple of hours to crawl out, breathing with our heads sideways and mouths pressed practically against the ceiling, like in movies where ships are sinking. What is always slightly eerie in British caves is knowing of some of the deaths/disasters that happen right where you're standing. Like one in Yorkshire where several school kids died. Being in that same place and knowing that the claustrophobic cavity you stood in was someone's final view. I grew up in limestone country. There are quite a few caves. I was on a school trip, and a few adventurous guys and myself found a very small passage that was big enough to fit through. It didn't get any bigger, and was very tight. Eventually it ended in a slit about 3 inches high, with me at the front. I hadn't really thought it through. I guess we all expected to discover a huge chamber and be able to turn around. Waiting for the train of people behind me to back out was panic-inducing, but I held it together. My view for about 10 minutes was this little impassable slit. It was all fine in the end obviously, just a lot of very difficult, very slow backward crawling on my belly with the roof on my back. A former co-worker of mine was a caver. He was invited to explore and map a newly discovered cave, Main Drain Cave. This cave is a vertical cave and ended up being the deepest, vertically, in UT and one of the deepest in the nation. Anyway, they had dropped down a very long drop and were working their way back up. My co-worker got near the top and came to a point where the rope he was climbing was nearly frayed at half. It had been rubbing on the sharp rock with each jostle of him climbing the rope. You know when you're not sure if the lights flicked off and on really fast or not? That kept happening for like 5-ish minutes and then stopped. Around 15 more minutes than was supposed to have passed had gone by. We have a 5-minute timer that goes off when we start to remind us to put down markers etc., and we hadn't noticed any beeping whatsoever. Nothing happened after that, but it happened to both my buddy and I, so it must have been something strange. Peas. We know for a fact that there weren't any gases because we have detectors for various toxic gases and the area we were exploring doesn't have any no gas hazards. I can answer this as I have been caving as a hobby for several years now. Nothing really creepy ever happens caving, but I have been in some dangerous situations which have left me questioning my sanity, or the sanity of those around me. So I used to cave with a gang of people from a university club, but I had been out of university a few years now and been doing my own thing. Well, one weekend me and my friend, let's call her Jane, decide we should go on a little trip to cave with these guys, you know, to see how the old club was doing, the club that taught us how to cave. And we in turn thought the new guys when we were the oldies. So anyway, it's going okay and me and Jane go off caving on our own. But that evening we decide to join the group and cave with them in a cave near to the campsite. Now it was raining a bit and I was starting to feel uneasy, but to be honest I never voiced my concerns and just went with it. A large group of about 10 people get to this cave. The cave is basically a river on the inside normally, but it has a few levels of corridors that you can explore high above the river. The entrance is super tight though and require you to climb down this tight pipe using your feet to feel for footholds. There is no way to see what is below you, and basically if you lose your footing there is a nasty fall of about 3 meters. But keep your head on and it's fine. Well anyway, we get to the cave and the guys in the club are doing their thing, me and Jane are just the old dudes coming along for old times. We get into the cave and there is one girl who gets stuck in the entrance at the end of the group. Turns out it was her second cave ever and they brought her into this one. Even though she panicked in a much larger cave earlier that day. 2 of the leaders stay behind to help her calm down and get her into the cave, and the rest of us potter on, down some of the long corridors and start exploring the cave. Then I ask the leader of the group, a girl I had thought how to cave, let's call her Deekshit, what time it is. She tells me she does not have a watch. I ask her how does she what time to leave the cave to be on time for the call out. A call out is arguably the most important thing caving. It's where you let someone on the surface, even your buddy who you ring, know that you and whoever else are going to this cave, and will be out at this time. Without a call out no one will know you are missing for days and have hundreds of caves to check. Anyway, the leader of all these sweet innocent beginners, tells me that she did not leave a call out or bring any first aid kit or safety equipment. I hold my cool because I don't want the others to panic, but I tell her quietly, I am now the call out, be out of the cave at this time. I give her my watch and start back towards the entrance. At the entrance the two other leaders are sitting with the girl who got stuck earlier. They managed to get her into the cave and are sitting with her. I tell them the situation and tell them I am leaving the cave. They ask me to go get a SRT kit, basically ropes and a harness, in case the panicked girl needs it to climb back up. So I do just that. A while later I come back with the gear which they did not have all of, and I had to borrow off other cavers who were luckily at the same campsite. I get back to the cave and the others are leaving slowly as it is a difficult entrance and climbing out is harder. They all manage to get out, but lo and behold the panicking girl gets stuck, and with two leaders trapped below her she is blocking the entrance. We harness her up and I rig up an anchor to try and secure her on a rope in case she falls, but she is wedged tight. Then I get the news from the others below that the cave is starting to fill because of the rain. After what seems like eternity of them nicely talking to this panicking girl, telling her she is doing great and she will be fine, she is getting worse at this stage. I freak out. I shout at her that she needs to get her shit together and get out of the cave, because two others are stuck behind her. It kind of works and she nearly stops having a panic attack, not entirely, but stops hyperventilating, which just makes her more stuck. She still won't climb out though, so against all common sense I lie down into the hole and grab her by the harness and pull her up and out of the cave. After that I told the club they needed to get their shit together and stop being cowboys, but I haven't gone back to them since. Don't know if this sounds as creepy, but definitely gave us a scare and then laugh. My aunt and my cousin were visiting us in our town for the first time since before she gave birth to him. She says she would like to go to Carlsbad Caverns, so we do. We're underground and kind of break off from everyone else on the designated path. I believe we just passed the section between the totem pole heading toward the seating area called Top of the Cross, when all of a sudden we hear this screechy rumbling just echoing through the caves. We all just kind look at each other wondering what was going on. Is there an earthquake? Is part of the caverns collapsing? Then it just stops, everything is okay and we keep walking and joke with each other. The caves are so quiet, even with the hundreds of people that are down there with you. I mean, just talking normally feels wrong and you feel like you have to whisper. All you hear are faint mumblings. So, when this sudden rumbling just came roaring through, not gonna lie, gave me a mini heart attack, and it definitely freaked out my mom and my aunt. Anyways, as we get closer to the seating area we hear it again. But this time we are able to see what it was. It was a freaking park ranger. Yup, the ranger was pushing a cart with her laptop in it, and I'm assuming equipment to monitor the cave's temperatures, readings, etc. Gave us a good laugh after that. I went caving in France when I was at school, and two events stick out as being terrifying, and probably inappropriate for 13-year-olds. 1. We all had to descend through a hole in the floor on a pulley/belay system, and my friends waited at the bottom for me. I was one of the last to go down, with their head torches switched off. When they all grabbed me in unison in the pitch black, I almost shat myself even though I knew they would be down there. I couldn't see the floor, so didn't know what height I was at. 2. A rock formation called the coffin lay between us and the exit. Basically we had to lie on our backs and shuffle through these rock shells which barely let us get through. My helmet got stuck and I thought I was going to die there as my chin strap was too tight to get the helmet off. Cue screeching and failing. Eventually I dislodged myself by some miracle. When we were kids, 10ish, we found a cave way back in the woods at our cottage. Now when I say cave you have to use your imagination, because this was an 8LX5WX4H-ish hole in the wall. This became a project for us to find mosses and ferns to adorn our hideout, and make a door out of bark and sticks. We came back to our hideout in early spring to find the door out of place. I picked it up and moved close to the entrance to replace the door, only to find a large furry friend squatting in our hideout. Now normally we don't have any of the large fauna on our side of the lake, but we had still taken wildlife safety just in case. So when I quickly backed off and mouthed bear, my 8-year-old sister did what she was taught to do and started yelling as loud as she could. She only half paid attention at the bear aware course. Never wake a sleeping bear, and never scare a bear in a corner. Thank God we were far enough away by the time it woke up and squeezed out that it decided to run away from us scary 8 to 13-year-olds instead of maul us. Not a cave, but similar. So at my old school, there were maintenance tunnels under the school. There were the new ones, and there were the old ones that the school didn't use anymore. My friend Chloe and I found an entrance to the old tunnels in a classroom that wasn't being used. We had to pick a lock on a trapdoor, unscrew a round metal top, and lower ourselves into a square, dirty tunnel. The main tunnels were about 2 feet wide by 3 feet tall, with maybe 2 inches of dirty, black water in the bottom. The tunnels were very dark and cold, and smelled of mold. We began exploring it a little bit every day. One time, we were in there for maybe 20 minutes, and Chloe passed out. Turns out there were some dangerous gases down there. I had to drag her out. Next time, we brought masks and flashlights, and began mapping out the system. We tracked more than 700 feet of twisting, turning tunnels. They went up, down, and turned to the sides. We used chalk to mark the walls so we could find our way back. After a particularly long expedition, maybe 3 hours, we headed back to where we came in. Only to find it locked. We pushed and turned on the metal cover. It didn't budge. We were trapped in. We rushed through the tunnels, trying to open each of the 3 openings we had found over time. None of them would open. Any panic we had now surfaced, and to say the least, we were kind of freaking out. We ended up heading down a tunnel we hadn't been down before. After a while, I kept hearing noises behind us. I told Chloe, who was crawling in front of us. We froze, turned off our flashlight, and listened. Sure enough, a steady splashing sound was following us. We freaked TF out, and made a run for it. Let's keep in mind, we had no idea where we were going at this point. After maybe 10 minutes of a panic dash through the tunnels, tripping over pipes and scraping our knees, we emerged into a bigger room. What the hell? We realized it wasn't a room, but sort of a down section of a much bigger room. We had come out in the drainage section of the boiler room. Now you might think our adventure stopped here, but it didn't. This was the second Friday of the month. There was someone doing maintenance down here. We hid behind some old metal stairs, and when the guy left for more tools, we scrambled up the stairs, out the door, and hid in the girls' locker rooms for the rest of the day. We never did find out who locked us down there, or what that splashing noise was. The end. Sorry it wasn't exactly a cave, but I hope you enjoyed it. This happened when I went on a cave tour with my family when I was small. We're all huge claustrophobes, so we did the run-of-the-mill cavern tour that took you into huge rooms. They offered a spelunking tour that was spelunking for dummies. Emphasis on it being safe and fun for the whole family. Our tour is in this cavern listening to the tour guide when the spelunking tour guide pops out of a little hole in the wall. He tells our tour guide that the woman directly behind him got her hips stuck and he needed to go to the other end to get everyone behind her to back out. This is like 10 or so people. So our tour for some reason followed him. We get to the other end and find out that the last guy in also got stuck in the tunnel. So there's 8 or 9 people stuck between these 2 heavier people. They were probably in there 30 to 45 minutes. When they came out, a couple of them seemed rattled. Most were fine, which baffles me. They said the tunnel was really small. Our tour ended while they dealt with that, but no one thought to help our tour get back out through the maze we entered, and we were told not to leave so we wouldn't get lost. So we had to sit and watch this all unfold. The company offered our tour a refund and tickets for the spelunking tour, a higher value than the tour we were on. I think everyone declined the tickets. We came to a big chamber, then turned off all the lanterns but one and smoked a joint. Then my buddy broke off one of those pointy rock things from the ceiling and knocked our lantern out. Took us 10 minutes to find a lantern. He couldn't handle his weed, so we never took him caving again. I used to be a tour guide at the Cave of the Winds in Colorado. On one tour we had everyone blow out their lanterns and experience total darkness, or as close as you can get. After only a few moments you can actually start to hallucinate as your brain tries to make up for the sensory deprivation, which can be disorienting and scary. Did it tons of times, never got used to it. 2 friends and I were caving in WV. We had planned to do a through trip of Bowden's Cave, going in one entrance and coming out the other side. About 90% of the way through, our one friend slammed her knee on a sharp pointy rock and could not put any weight on it. Crawling back out on the knee was out the question, and climbing up out of the back exit was tricky. Any accident in a cave is 10 times more serious than inside, but that wasn't really the scary part of the trip. We finally made it out the back of the cave at about 1 a.m. We were hiking through the woods, slowly, back to our car, mostly paying attention to our hurt friend. Suddenly there was this blood-curdling growly screamy noise that came from directly ahead. We looked up to see a pair of eyes at roughly eye level drop to the ground and slowly move to our left. In hindsight it was probably just a bobcat that we startled. We like to think it was a bobcat and not a mountain lion. Makes us feel better. The single most instant real-life jump scare I've ever experienced. It's our generic adventure, but we like to get down to a point in the cave and turn our lights off, then see if we can make our way out. By hell, it's difficult. You can't even tell up from down. This is where a blind person would come in handy. I just saw this the other day about an explorer who was in a mine in Western Australia who had been through hundreds of caves and found this thoroughly creepy. He was pretty far into this gold mine and heard what sounds like whispered chanting. When he speaks it seems to stop, then it suddenly comes back louder and possibly more urgent. Did you ever hear the creepypasta of Ted the Caver? I thought not. It's not a story a Redditor would tell you. It's a classic story. Ted the Caver is a story series of the last decade, so clever and addictive that it could use the hobby of spelunking as a backdrop to create atmosphere. It was so archetypical of the golden age of creepypasta that it could even creep the ones who read it years later. The creepypasta written between 2006 to 2011 is an era that many would consider to be sublime. It became so well known. The only thing that was guaranteed was that it could be crossed with higher evolved memes, which eventually, of course, it did. Unfortunately, it's a creepypasta, so when creepypasta was inundated with weak bullshit, and fewer people sought it out. Depressing. Ted the Caver could be found all over the internet back then, but not today. Whilst walking my doggo last summer, we went off the bike trail and down into some fields. There was a large cattle pass built into a hill, like a tunnel/cave cows used to travel under roads, and we decided to check it out. Big mistake. There was a dank stench spewing from this rocky hellhole. Upon further investigation, we found a dead raccoon rotting away, and promptly noped out of there. I used to cave a lot, haven't been recently and need to go again. One of the last times I went we explored some caves that I'd never been in before, which led to two somewhat scary incidents for me. Cave number 1 was my type of cave. Wet, muddy, tight spaces and lots of crawling. The stuff I love. To get out of the cave though required getting through 20 meters of very deep water, in other words, swimming. In overalls and gumboots. As you can imagine, for someone like me who is not a strong swimmer, I went under pretty quick, even with a blown-up wine bladder in my shirt for flotation. I made it out, obviously, but I swallowed a hell of a lot of water and probably came quite close to drowning. Which is why I was really pissed when the guy who'd been behind me the whole time asked why I hadn't used the narrow ledge on the side to walk on like they had and avoided swimming. Nice of them to tell me about it. Cave number 2 was more of a pretty cave, which is still nice but not as fun for me. So on the way back I decided I'd squeeze through the little side tunnel running alongside the main path. Some of the guys had used it on our way down so I knew it was safe, but none of us took into account that taking the tunnel down meant I was now using it up, and with a fairly sharp bend in the middle, probably close to 90 degrees. Sure enough, when I tried to turn on my side to get round the bend, I got stuck. There's a photo of me looking at the guys out the end, and you can see that my shoulders and hips are bigger than the hole I needed to get out of. It took a lot of pushing one end and pulling the other, but I did eventually get out. Funnily enough, no one else wanted to try it after that. Took a trip to Iceland, me, my girlfriend, my 2 friends and their significant others. We had it on our itinerary to stop and check out a lava tube. An underground tunnel that lava used to flow through. This tunnel was completely underground after the first 200 meters or so. It twisted and turned so we lost all sight of the daylight from the entrance. Pitch black. Total darkness. We start our little hike. The tube is only 2 kilometers, if that, from start to the dead end. It was July but there was still snow in some of the tunnel that was open to the outside. Very cool. We came across a few couples who told us that the rocks get treacherous and they didn't have flashlights. We had a few and were all fairly athletic. Figured sure, why not? After about an hour of going up and down the large boulders and volcanic rock we get to a large hill in the tunnel. At the top of this hill is this huge boulder just sitting very precariously at the top. The boulder was tapered off a bit on the back side, so it wasn't bad to get up, but the front side, we saw at first, was flat. Not smooth, but just a straight, flat part of rock. I climbed up because it'd be a great sport a Superman pose for a picture and a good storytelling piece. I climb up, Get into position, my buddy snaps the picture. After he takes the picture, with flash, obviously, one of the girls noticed something rather odd to my left. Everyone shines their flashlights on the area, and about 6 feet to my left, suspended 10 to 12 feet above the bottom of the cave, was a rope. Anchored to the ceiling. Came down out of the anchor to a knot about 4 feet from the ceiling. The knot turned into a loop. The loop had been cut at the bottom. It looked a lot like a noose. Yellow nylon rope. Suspended 1.75 kilometers into a lava tube. 20-ish feet above the floor of the cave. The strangest part was that there was no easy way to get to the roof to anchor it. It was a very well done anchor and had been there a while. It looked like someone was determined to come out and spend their final hours in absolute darkness. We kept going, but noped about it the whole time. Crawling through a super tight passage where I couldn't move unless I sucked my gut in. The big chamber we eventually reached was very impressive, but I didn't enjoy it at all because I was so anxious about having to crawl back out through that passage again. I went to school near Chattanooga, Tennessee, great cave spot, so my friends and I loved to explore the local caves when we could. I wasn't there for this one trip, but I was told by my friends that upon immediately entering one of the lesser-known caves in the area, they came across this lit candle in a wooden bowl placed on a protruding rock. They called out to see if anyone was nearby, but no answer. Most of my friends weren't concerned, but a couple were a little uncomfortable, so they left and decided to go to a different, more popular cave nearby. We later found out that the area around the Candle Cave is actually home to a few Wiccan groups. Perhaps they had something to do with it? We like to entertain that idea. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.